The hidden system, why pleasure was designed to control you. Aldous Huxley. Let me ask you something that might sound strange at first. What if the thing you crave the most pleasure isn't liberating you, but trapping you? What if your desire for comfort, for ease, for the next dopamine hit, is not a path to happiness, but a system of control? Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, saw this coming nearly a century ago. While George Orwell warned us about a future where we'd be crushed by pain and surveillance, Huxley warned us about something far more subtle. A future where we'd be seduced into submission not by force, but by pleasure. And the terrifying part, he was right. We're living in it, right now. We think of pleasure as a reward. We believe that once we work hard, suffer a little, or get through something difficult, we deserve to feel good. And that's logical. In moderation, pleasure affirms life. It connects us to joy, intimacy, meaning. But what happens when pleasure becomes the goal instead of the reward? What happens when the system begins offering us pleasure before we've done anything to earn it? When it's always available, constantly within reach, endlessly pushed into our lives through screens, sugar, sex, noise, and novelty. We stop growing, we stop thinking, we stop resisting.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Huxley's dystopia wasn't filled with torture chambers or secret police. It was filled with entertainment, sexual freedom, and a drug called soma, a perfect pleasure pill with no side effects. In that world, people didn't rebel because they didn't want to. Why suffer for truth when you can be endlessly satisfied by distraction? Why fight for meaning when comfort is handed to you in perfectly measured doses? And that's the trap. When pleasure is used not as a celebration of life but as a sedative, it becomes a tool of control. It makes you docile. It makes you passive. It makes you content with a life that is slowly being drained of depth. Think about your own life. How many hours have you lost to mindless scrolling, to binge watching, to snacking, to chasing likes or swipes or views? How often do you reach for something pleasurable not because you want it, but because you can't bear the silence, the discomfort, the boredom? And here's the deeper question: who benefits from that? Who profits from your attention being fractured, your thoughts being shallow, your mind being constantly soothed but never sharpened? The system does. And by system, I don't mean some grand conspiracy run by evil masterminds. I mean the emergent structure of modern society: algorithms, corporations, platforms that have learned that the easiest way to control people is not by restricting their freedom, but by overwhelming it. The more choices you have, the more ways you can feel good instantly, the less likely you are to choose something hard, something meaningful, something real. Huxley saw that a world of endless pleasure would not make us free. It would make us numb. And numbness is the perfect condition for control. Because numb people don't protest. Numb people don't ask questions. Numb people don't dream beyond the next pleasure fix. And when pleasure becomes the default state, the pursuit of meaning feels like suffering. Silence feels like agony. Stillness feels like death. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can wake up. We can reclaim our agency. But first, we have to see the system for what it is: not a prison of bars, but a prison of velvet. One that convinces us we're free because we're smiling, laughing, entertained. But deep down, we know something's wrong. We know we're not fully alive. We know that pleasure, by itself, is empty, So here's a question only you can answer. When was the last time you chose discomfort on purpose? When was the last time you said no to an easy pleasure not because you had to, but because you wanted to stay awake? This isn't about rejecting joy or living ascetically. It's about recognizing that if we don't control pleasure, it will control us. And once it has you, it doesn't need chains. It just needs your consent. And here's the chilling part Huxley understood better than anyone: you will give that consent willingly. You will smile while doing it. You will say, "I'm just relaxing." You will believe you are free because you feel good. But feeling good is not the same as being free. That's the illusion. That's the trap. So what do we do? How do we escape a system that rewards us for staying asleep? That's the journey. That's the rebellion. And it begins with one unsettling, revolutionary idea: if pleasure is always easy, it's probably not good. If it's always available, it's probably not real. And if it keeps you from asking who you are or why you're here, it's not pleasure, it's anesthesia. The pleasure prison: how instant gratification rewires your mind against you. Let's go deeper. If pleasure has been weaponized into a control mechanism, then the battlefield is your brain. And the enemy isn't outside you, it's the wiring inside your own skull, shaped silently by what you choose to reach for, minute by minute. Huxley understood that if you can make someone associate comfort with submission, you don't need to chain them. You just need to keep them entertained. But what he couldn't have foreseen in 1932 was how technology would take his warning and turn it into a blueprint for reality. Today, we don't just enjoy pleasure. We are addicted to instant pleasure. And that addiction is changing the very structure of our minds. Let's talk about dopamine. Every time you get a like, a swipe, a bite, a buzz, a scroll, your brain gets a hit. It feels good, but dopamine isn't the chemical of happiness. It's the chemical of wanting. It doesn't say this is meaningful. It says do it again. So we do, over and over. We crave another hit, another reel, another episode, another notification. And every time we obey that craving, we reinforce a loop and a neural feedback system. Pleasure becomes not a reward for living, but the reason we live. And worse, it becomes the thing we can't live without. This is how the pleasure prison builds itself. Not overnight, but through repetition. You reach for your phone when you're bored. You order food when you're stressed. You binge when you feel lonely. You scroll when you don't want to think. And every time you do that, your brain learns discomfort equals danger. Silence equals pain. Stillness equals failure. So it rewires itself to avoid those states at all costs. And before you even realize it, you've built a cage around yourself, a cage made of convenience, gratification, and short-term rewards. Now here's the dangerous part. While your brain is being conditioned for easy highs, it's unlearning how to wait, how to focus, how to delay gratification. And these aren't just skills, they're the foundation of depth, of meaning, of real achievement. Every great thing in life, love, mastery, purpose, demands patience. It demands the ability to stay with discomfort long enough to push through it. But how can you push through anything when your brain has been trained to flinch at even a second of friction? This isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. Because if your mind is constantly hijacked by the next hit of pleasure, you lose the ability to ask the deeper questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What am I building? What matters to me when no one is offering rewards? You stop living from the inside out and start living from the outside in, responding, reacting, consuming, letting the algorithm guide your attention, your thoughts, your identity. And let me ask you, who benefits from that? Who gains when your attention span shrinks, your patience dissolves, and your soul is too distracted to rebel? And the system does. The economy of attention, and the marketplaces that profit when you're not thinking clearly. The platforms that monetize your dopamine loops while you convince yourself you're just relaxing. That's not freedom. That's programming. And the most terrifying part, you installed the software yourself. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize: you can uninstall it. You can rewire your brain. You can reverse the process. It starts the moment you stop chasing the next hit and start sitting in the discomfort, even for 5 minutes, even for one. When you resist the urge to numb, to scroll, to snack, to escape, that's not weakness. That's rebellion. That's you breaking a link in the chain. And yes, it's hard. You'll feel anxious, restless, bored. But what if boredom isn't the enemy? What if it's a doorway? What if discomfort is where your real self has been hiding all along, beneath the noise, beneath the pleasure, beneath the pleasure, beneath the programming? So I'll leave you with this. What would your life look like if you stopped feeding the loop? If you stopped letting your pleasure-driven brain run the show? Could you endure the silence long enough to hear your real thoughts? Could you sacrifice the easy high for something deeper, something earned, something real? Because in that moment, you're not just choosing discomfort, you're choosing freedom. Manufactured consent, how you're tricked into loving your chains. By now, we've peeled back the curtain on how pleasure isn't just a feeling, it's a tool. A lever carefully pulled, not necessarily by some shadowy overlord, but by systems, structures, and incentives that evolve to shape you toward predictability, toward obedience, toward consumption. But here's where it gets even more insidious. The most effective control doesn't come from force. It comes from getting you to want your chains, to not just accept the system, but to defend it, and to love it. This is what Noam Chomsky called manufactured consent. And Huxley showed us how it would unfold, not with propaganda alone, but with pleasure, with comfort, with emotional sedation. Let's break this down. When your deepest desires have been shaped by forces outside of you, when your cravings are no longer your own, but engineered responses to stimuli designed to pacify, you are no longer a free being. You are a participant in your own control. You're not fighting the system, you're feeding it. And the most terrifying part, you think you're making free choices. You think you're living on your own terms. But ask yourself how many of your preferences were truly born within you. How many of your habits, your goals, your pleasures were chosen before you even had the awareness to question them? This system doesn't need to silence you. It just needs to fill your mind with noise and to keep you entertained, distracted, feel comfortable. And slowly, through repetition and reward, it teaches you that comfort equals safety, that pleasure equals purpose, and that disruption equals danger. So when a moment of clarity arises, when the silence creeps in, and you begin to feel the weight of your own thoughts the system has already trained you to run, to reach for your phone, to open a tab, and to scroll, swipe, snack, sleep, anything but sit in the ambiguity of your own agency. So how do we break free if the chains are invisible? If they've been wrapped in velvet and sold to us as gifts? The first step is brutal honesty. You have to admit that the things you love might be the very things numbing you, that your favorite distractions might be killing your depth, and that your freedom might be a brilliant illusion. Because once you can see that, you can begin to ask the question that shatters the illusion: what do I truly want? Not what you've been told to want, not what the ads suggest, not what everyone else around you is chasing, but you. What does your soul crave when it's not being drugged with stimulation? What kind of life would you build if you weren't being rewarded for staying asleep? Most people never ask that question. Why? Because it's dangerous. Once you ask it, everything changes. You can no longer unsee the manipulation. You can no longer pretend that your habits are harmless. You begin to recognize that you've been trained, not educated, conditioned, not liberated. And that realization is terrifying, because it means the burden of change is on you. No one is coming to save you. There is no off switch for the system. There is only awareness and choice. But here's the paradox. The moment you become aware, the system loses power. It only thrives in unconsciousness. It only controls you when you believe it's your friend. When you start to question your daily rituals, your automatic responses, your unexamined pleasures, you begin to take back ground. You begin to decondition yourself. You begin to remember what freedom actually feels like, not the freedom to consume, but the freedom to choose. So let me ask you, what do you defend that might be controlling you? What comforts do you cling to that secretly keep you small? What distractions do you rationalize, even though you know they're eroding your depth? These aren't easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Because if you can't question the system, you are owned by it, and worse, you will fight to protect it. That's the final trick, to make you believe that your chains are sacred, that your distractions are essential, that any attempt to unplug, to go deeper, to slow down is a threat to your lifestyle. But what if your lifestyle is the problem? What if the very thing you think is sustaining you is actually draining you? Breaking free isn't about rejecting all pleasure. It's about reclaiming your relationship with it, making it conscious, making it earned, making it sacred again. The rebel's mind, choosing meaning over comfort in a numb world. If you've made it this far, you already feel it, the quiet rebellion stirring in your mind. The realization that something in your daily life, something you've accepted as normal, might be a lie. A beautifully wrapped lie, yes, but a lie nonetheless. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to blind consumption, to empty pleasures, to calling comfort freedom. You start to crave something else, something deeper, something real, meaning. And here's the hard truth: meaning doesn't come wrapped in dopamine. It doesn't arrive as a push notification. It doesn't feel good at first. It feels hard. It feels slow. It feels like waking up in a world that's trained you to stay asleep. To choose meaning in a numb world is to become a rebel. Not the kind waving flags or shouting slogans, but the kind who dares to live with intention. Who dares to say, I will not be seduced by ease. I will not be pacified by noise. I will not trade purpose for comfort. That kind of rebel is dangerous. not because they destroy the system, but because they no longer need it. And the system cannot control someone who no longer needs its rewards. But here's the twist. Meaning doesn't just appear one day like a gift. It's built, slowly, painfully, through choices no one will see, through sacrifices no one will applaud, but through moments where you sit in silence, resisting the urge to numb yourself. You build meaning when you do the uncomfortable thing because it aligns with your values. When you delay gratification because you're building something bigger than yourself. When you choose truth over feeling good, that's when you start to break the cycle. That's when you start to feel alive, not stimulated, not entertained, but alive. You start to realize that the world doesn't need more followers of pleasure. It needs more creators of meaning. And that begins with you, with how you spend your time, with what you pay attention to, with what you don't run away from, the uncomfortable conversation, the unfinished dream, the long silence, the tough question. Because here's the great paradox of life. The things that feel good now usually cost you later. But the things that challenge you now often reward you for a lifetime. Want to know who you really are? Don't look at what you crave. Look at what you're willing to suffer for. Look at what you're willing to delay for. That's where your real self lives, not in your pleasures, but in your principles. So ask yourself, what are you building that no one sees? What pain are you willing to endure for something that matters? What part of you is still asleep, still waiting for permission, still reaching for the easy high instead of the hard truth? This is the rebel's mind. It doesn't reject pleasure, it just refuses to be ruled by it. It doesn't glorify pain, it just understands that meaning often hides behind it. It doesn't seek escape, it seeks engagement. Full, uncomfortable, radical engagement with life as it is, not just as it feels. And if enough of us reclaim this way of thinking not as an ideology, but as a daily practice, we begin to create something dangerous to the system, a generation that can't be seduced. People who aren't looking to be pacified, a culture that values depth over distraction, substance over stimulation, purpose over pleasure. So in the end, the choice is yours. You can stay in the velvet prison comfortable, entertained, numb. Or you can walk out, slowly, painfully, fully awake, and begin to build a life of meaning, one conscious choice at a time. The world will offer you pleasure, but your soul is asking for more. If this video woke something up in you, don't scroll away. Sit with it. Question everything, and maybe, just maybe, start your own rebellion. Thank you for watching.